Our folklore is full of tales of ogres, trolls, giants, and other imaginary monsters, which today might seem a little bit like they've been plucked out of thin air. But the likelihood is that at the very least, these characters are our own personifications of historical threats, both perceived and very real. Really not that long ago, our world was filled with dangers that today most of us can only truly feel in our instincts. Horror movies, ghost trains, and general xenophobia tickle the inherent itch to fear things, a hardwired response to threats that have long since passed. In this video, we're going to pay tribute to some of these threats, specifically of the monster mammal persuasion, and finish up with one that really knocks them all out of the park as the closest thing humanity has to an eternal nemesis. Before we get on with it though, let's start with one that didn't make it onto the list and explain why. Humans and large predators have shared their habitats without a single break since the moment our species emerged. And this of course means that predators were a threat in our lineages way back before humans existed, while we were still arboreal monkey-like things. And this will be important to remember later on, so hold that thought, because it relates to not only how we were threatened by these animals, but how these threats shaped our species. But in the time between our monkey grandparents and our slightly racist Facebook post-sharing ones, our species has traversed innumerable dangers from prehistoric mammalian predators. Some were enormous and some were much smaller, and in this video we're going to try and pick out the top 5. But before we do, here's a quick spoiler. The animal responsible for the most human deaths ever is not, as is so commonly repeated, the mosquito. Mosquitoes are not mammals, so they wouldn't make it onto this list anyway, but just as a way to put our fears into perspective, it's useful to quantify the danger a little bit. Malaria kills more than 500,000 people worldwide every year, and this is a significant number, but it is very far from the top of the list. The animal responsible for the most human suffering and death is only going to make it into the runners-up category, simply because it's such a downer. But this one really has been a historical and continued threat. It's us. Murder victims worldwide are as many as all the deaths from malaria, and you can add another 50% to these if you include victims of armed conflicts. Then there are traffic accidents, many of which are avoidable, and which kill 3 times as many as malaria, and you might want to branch out to include deaths from ignorance and neglect, such as those caused by anti-vaxxers, corporations, and modern consumerism, which are responsible for countless deaths from viruses, sugar, and famine, respectively. So humans are by far our biggest mammalian threat, and our biggest threat in general. But it's not why we're here, so to excuse ourselves for a moment, here are the top 5 prehistoric non-human mammalian threats that our species has endured since the dawn of our existence. Our close cousins, the orangutans, are the largest arboreal animal in the world. A large male can weigh as much as a fairly large human, at around 75 kilograms. In stark contrast to us, it spends most of its day way up in the canopy, eating leaves and being generally pretty zen. Orangutans in Sumatra spend almost all their time in the canopy, while their relatives in Borneo venture down onto the ground substantially more often. And there's a good reason for this, because in Borneo, humans have eradicated all the tigers. In Sumatra there's still a handful left, and this small population is enough to keep the greatest of apes well up in the trees. An early hominid species like Homo erectus would have shared this habitat with them for at least 1.5 million years. The so-called Mojokerto child fossil is a sign that in Java, human populations lived in constant threat of ancient tigers. Today tigers are the largest real cats on the planet, and can weigh over 260 kilograms. They can grow to 3 meters long, and they most definitely can and do hunt humans for food. While they're almost all gone now, and occupy only around 7% of their historical range, tigers would once have been found all across Eurasia. So from the moment our species started its radiation onto that particular landmass, tigers would have been there to face us. And by the time we were advancing into Europe, we no longer had the grip strength of an orangutan to pull us back up to the safety of the canopy. And the invention of agriculture only made things worse. As forests were cut down to grow crops, tiger habitats reduced, as did their prey. Territorial conflicts intensified between the two species, and attacks from hungry tigers made things worse. As recently as the 1840s, tiger attacks numbered in the hundreds per year. Sadly, this rivalry was irreconcilable and resulted in the widespread persecution of the tiger to the point where high bounties led to their mass slaughter and tens of thousands of these magnificent animals were killed. Still, even now, tigers do hunt people. Some even bear grudges and have been said to identify and specifically hunt down individuals who have attacked them. So for at least 200,000 years, tigers have been a threat to our species, and may have even played a role in limiting some of those early human migrations out of Africa that failed. It's not a huge leap to move from tigers to saber-toothed tigers, and if we do that, we inevitably come to Smilodon and its kin. This one gets on the list not so much for being a direct predator of humans, but by being such a serious threat nonetheless. Smilodon was a large animal specialist, and perhaps so frighteningly big it wouldn't even have been likely to stalk humans. But at over 400 kilograms, there was very little any of our ancestors could have done about it if it did, at least on their own. The largest member of this genus could have been almost twice the mass of a tiger, and would have had incredible strength that's really quite hard to imagine. This bulky predator wouldn't have been so keen to chase things, and likely would have ambushed them instead, tackling them to the ground with thick, powerful forelimbs, and piercing the throat with the characteristic enormous teeth. Humans and Smilodon would far more likely have come into competition for food, and it might even have been that the earliest arrivals to the Americas would have stolen carcasses from these enormous cats, at which, as our ancestors had been doing historically in the savannah, and still do to this day, was also sort of our niche. This was no doubt a dangerous game, and since Smilodon was only a single genus in a widespread and long-lasting family of saber-tooths, our ancestors would have been faced with this danger throughout much of their prehistory. Unfortunately, Smilodon would go extinct, likely as a result of humans stealing all of their food. But it's easy to imagine, much like the tigers do today, that the last of the saber-tooths would have been desperate enough to consider humans food before they ultimately disappeared. Around the same time and place, there were the formidable guardians of the passages. As our ancestors began crossing from Eurasia to North America, they could well have been delayed by the very real threat of giant bears. Arctodus, the short-faced bear, spanned North America for the duration of the Pleistocene. This tremendous beast could have weighed almost a ton, and on its hind legs may have stood over 3 meters tall. This was an omnivore, feeding on similar forage to deer and tapirs, but it also required meat to maintain its enormous size, which meant that deer and tapirs would have themselves been on the menu. But Arctodus was truly enormous, and it would have hunted giant ground sloths, bison, llamas, and camels on the North American continent too. As a generalist and adaptable feeder, this genus would have been found in almost all habitats, and would certainly have made short work of a lone human, perhaps even several. Its huge size meant that it would have been able to bully the more agile Smilodon off its kills, and here, too, is where it likely would have come into conflict with humans, who, as we mentioned, were probably doing the same thing. But perhaps even more frightening was that when trying to find shelter, our ancestors would no doubt have come face to face with some of these animals resting in caves. The short-faced bear meant that even for a bear, this beast had a killer bite, and in a land before torches and street lamps, it could reasonably be said that Arctodus is one of the primary drivers for our lingering fear of the dark, or monsters under the bed. But as usual, humans would prevail despite the cost, and Arctodus would also go extinct around 12,000 years ago. It wasn't just bears in the bedroom that our ancestors had to worry about. Many other dangerous animals inhabited caves too. One such mythical creature was the cave hyena, the apex predator of Pleistocene Eurasia. Cave hyenas would have grown larger in the colder realms of the Pleistocene, and cave paintings from across their range show that they likely looked a lot like spotted hyenas do today, only much larger. Estimates from their fossils suggest they were at least 60% heavier on average than the African hyenas who fend off lions on the regular today, and they could have grown as heavy as 100 kilograms. Cave hyenas are known from stockpiles of bones found in caves that they would have brought back as carcasses to feed on. They hunted steppe bison, aurochs, the giant Irish elk, and likely would have scavenged from the carcasses of larger animals like the woolly rhino. And from tooth marks on bones, we know that they also munched on Neanderthals. It's even possible that these formidable nocturnal foes would have hidden in caves as a way to avoid conflict with the resident humans, Neanderthals. And this would have been one way for the two predators to strike an ecological balance. And if so, it was likely our own species who spilled the milk by marching in and fighting them all to death, or killing all of their food too. Fortunately for most Europeans, and unfortunately for a few of us dreamers, there are no longer such epic creatures as hyenas, Smilodon, or short-faced bears and tigers in most of Europe. But there's one prehistoric monster that has endured, and this is a threat that humans have consistently faced all over the world, perhaps for longer and across more habitats than any other single mammalian predator. For this reason alone, it makes the top spot on this list, and by quite a wide margin. To get to it though, we must pass through a brief message of gratitude as we say again, thanks so much for watching, and if you're enjoying this content, please don't forget to give it a like in return. The more support we get, the more time and resources we can put into making more of them, so if you haven't already, please add yourself to the subscribers list to catch the new ones. In the South African cave known as Swartkrans, a chilling fossil find sent us back to around 1.8 million years into our ancestral past. This was well before the Homo genus had evolved, yet the fossils found were of a genus that would perhaps one day descend into our very own. The fossils in Swartkrans contained a skull plate that once belonged to the head of a hominid called Paranthropus. Paranthropus is thought to be an offshoot of the branch of hominids that led to our genus, but in some circles it's also thought to be synonymous with Australopithecus, one of whose species is thought to have been the direct ancestors of modern humans. But this distinction isn't entirely relevant here, because what was found in the brain case of the sample at Swartkrans demonstrates a threat that would absolutely have been aimed at our ancestors just as much as their close cousins. In the skull were two pierced holes leading directly into the brain cavity, at the front of the head just above the eyes. The holes are spaced in such a way that exactly matches the remains of a large cat species from the region, Panthera pardus. Panthera pardus evolved in Africa in the early Pleistocene, from the same line that the tiger would branch off from. And the earliest conclusive remains date back to Africa around 2 million years ago. But unlike most of our ancient threats, this prehistoric monster didn't disappear. This is the leopard, and it is an animal whose evolutionary history has brought it all over the world alongside us. From the moment our ancestors braved the terrestrial world from the trees, all the way to modern-day India, where humans are still at risk of being hunted by leopards. The leopard is one of the most successful predatory animals in the world, spanning almost all of Africa and Eurasia, occupying grasslands, savanna, forests, and rainforests. It would have kept our early ancestors sleeping up in nests in the trees, just like it does with chimpanzees nowadays. But being an agile climber, leopards would have made sure we weren't safe up there either. And by the time we were settled on the ground, it would have sneaked into our camps and stolen our children for hundreds of thousands of years. Leopard wounds have been found in the remains of Neanderthal children from 50,000 years ago, and it's strongly arguable that the leopard was one of the primary drivers of many of our advantageous adaptations as a species, such as fire, spears, cooperation, and cooking. And while most of the native predators that crossed us went the way of the mammoth, leopards endured. While dramatically reduced from their former range, they're still doing fairly well, and are the most successful cat species on the planet today. Yet, they never stopped hunting us. In some African habitats, non-human primates still make up 80% of the leopard's diet, showing that these truly are primate specialists. And these skills transfer neatly into cases where humans have stolen leopard kills, and the leopards have retaliated with lethal force. Leopards can run 60 kilometers an hour, and they're only surpassed in strength among the cats by the larger jaguars. They're able to run up a tree with a whole dead zebra in their mouth, and they literally evolved alongside humans to outmatch us as our natural predators. While leopard attacks in Africa are less intense, the same can't be said about India. In many places, these attacks even outpace that of the infamous tiger. In some regions of India, even today, leopards kill more people than all other large carnivores combined. And in the mountainous regions of Nepal, where kills are at their highest on record, over 50 people per year fall victim to our species' most ancient threat. Leopard attacks mostly occur at night, as sneaking ambush raids, primarily on our juveniles, pets, and elderly. While we humans have spanned the globe, stabbing and slashing pretty much everything that posed a threat, leopards have followed us, evolving, adapting, and surviving, even in the face of the mass extinctions we brought upon our nightmares. And they followed us since before the dawn of our species. Leopards are the reason that we're still jumpy reactionary monkeys, scared of the dark and easy to panic. And they're a modern reminder that we're not quite at the top of the food chain just yet. But conversely, they're also responsible for the pressure put on our species to improve, to find solutions, and to survive. Likewise, the very fact that the leopard remains among us in the wake of so many fallen species shows that we have provided that pressure in return. And before we consider a call to arms against the poor leopard, it's important to call back to the ultimate threat to humanity for a moment. It's worth noting that even in the most dangerous of leopard territories, the per capita danger amounts to 1.9 human deaths per million people per year. Compare that with the average global murder rate of around 60 per million people per year, and it definitely makes the leopard seem a little less scary. And that's pretty much it for this video. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks again for watching. We'll see you for the next one.